it's going to get less and less efficient. I think an example of that, we recently had an engagement where we were being asked to do something that was fairly high-level type of consulting, and the client insisted on tracking tasks broken down to almost like a 1 to 2 hour chunk size, and then making sure that we didn't go over on the estimated time of the tasks. And this would have been perfectly appropriate for tracking people executing a predefined set of test cases, but what we were doing was more open-ended than that. And we ended up getting in a situation where there was almost as much time spent trying to keep that tracking up to date as our needs evolved, and trying to renegotiate, rediscuss how much time was required for something as the engagement itself took. So you want to organize this stuff, but you don't want to so burden this thing, the relationship with bureaucracy, that it gets unmanageable. Okay, now let's take a look at life cycle models and how they might affect us carving up the work as part of this coordinative role. I'm going to use the V model just because it's an easier picture to draw. The same kinds of ideas would apply in Agile. Same kind of analysis would have to be done, but we'll use the V model here, sequential model, and I'm assuming that all of you are familiar with the V model, so I'm not going to go through and explain how that works. So if you look at this, the capture of requirements and the development of acceptance tests are things that you could, and I would recommend should, retain in-house. I mean, obviously you're going to have to hand requirements off to an outsourced development team if you're going to outsource the development, and those requirements need to be reasonably well specified. You know, just saying, well, you know, the classic example, I want a boat. You know, just build me a boat. And that's anything. You can get back anything from a rowboat to a you know, the Queen Mary, with that kind of requirement. You're going to need to give people more detail than that. And so you're going to keep that piece in-house. Now, the design of the system is then going to be done by the outsourced development organization. Let's assume we're outsourcing the development. And let's assume that you picked a separate organization to do the testing of what these people develop. And I'll get back into why I think that's a good idea a little bit later. So that outsourced test organization is going to, using the design and the requirements, create the integration and system tests. So that work is getting carved up. Now, outsourced development organization implements the system based on the design, and the outsourced development organization develops the component or unit tests to be run, depending on the name you prefer, and they execute those unit tests. And of course, this is happening you know, in real time. There's actually, at the base of the V, more of a cycle that's happening here, right? It's you know, we're iterating around, and indeed this part of the process might very well be following Agile life cycle, and still be overall project following a V. Now, once that is done, to some extent, we can start getting the integration testing going with the outsourced test organization. And I'm leaving out the feedback loop here from this picture, but of course you would need to have a feedback loop going back and forth, you know, between these organizations where there are bugs and new releases being handed off, and this is one of those touch point logistic kind of issues that I talked about. And once the outsourced test organization has given you the green light and hopefully found all of the defects that need to be found, they hand off to acceptance, hand off back to you for in-house acceptance test. And if this process has gone well, you should not find any bugs other than ones that maybe are environment specific. If you couldn't replicate your production environment in the at the outsourced test organization, or couldn't provide them access to a test lab that replicated it. Indeed, I would say that one of the KPIs, the key process indicators for success here, would be a very, very low percentage of defects detected in acceptance test, ideally 0%. Now, 0 is a very small number, a very very hard number to get to, as we know, with respect to bugs. But that should be the target. And any time a bug escapes into an acceptance test in a situation like this, that should be a cause of some analysis, root cause analysis, saying how did this happen? Not who's responsible for this happening, who do we beat up, but how did this happen, and how do we change the process to try to prevent that in the future? So I just noticed that what I'm getting at there is that not only do you need to have this life cycle model defined and the work clearly carved up in a well-defined, well-understood way, as you see in this picture, but you also need to have KPIs defined that are going to allow you to measure how successfully the process is executing. And at some point, there need to be mechanisms for instituting process improvements, and in the most extreme cases, even clawbacks from vendors if they're not delivering as promised. The vendors, in this case the outsourced test organization and the outsourced development organization, should be involved in defining what these KPIs are and what the targets for success are. Now, this slide is showing the checkpoints, project management, change management aspects of the V model. This is the same project, but showing what I was talking about before, the coordinative pieces of the puzzle, as it were. So there are some things that we'll need to do on the project management side. We will need to periodically re-review budgets and schedules, and we would do that at the end of each of these phases and make sure, okay, what needs to be adjusted. So we'd be exercising some amount of control there from a budget schedule point of view, and then we would also need to have change management in place, and features, course correction, and also, of course, once you get into testing, it might even be bug triage aspects of change management. Now, change management is going to be a little different in an outsourced project than it would be in a all in-house project, because change now has financial implications. People are going to expect to get paid, basically, if their scope of work is increased. And so that means that the level of formality and so forth associated with the change management process has to be higher. Okay, now I'm gonna give my pitch here for why I think you should use somebody else to do testing than the people you use for development. And of course, you could say, well, that's pretty self-serving, Rex, since you run a company that in large part benefits from outsourced testing. And of course, I would love to have